Stay tuned later for my personal documentary recommendation. Cannon fire erupted from the wake of the English ship, but the escape was too rapid. In his quarters, Captain Gibson awoke from a weak and drunken slumber, alarmed by the ship's movement. For 6 months, the English crew of Gibson's Spanish-supported privateering expedition had endured being anchored while waiting for documentation, deprived of the modest wages they had been promised. Gibson staggered to the quarterdeck and found his first mate, Henry Every, at the helm. Demanding to know the ship's destination, Gibson was met with Every's bold response. "I am the captain of this ship now, and this is my cabin. Therefore, you must leave. I am bound for Madagascar, determined to make my fortune and that of all the brave men who stand with me." The crew, weary of honest sailing that had offered only long, grueling voyages for meager food and wages, embraced this new path. Captain Gibson and 16 others were cast off in a small boat, while Every and 80 mutinous comrades set their sights on Madagascar, where men of their kind could seize fortune through sword and pistol. Another Englishman, Thomas Tew, had already blazed a trail there, building his legend by plundering the riches of the Indian Ocean. Renaming their ship the Fancy, the pirates sailed first to the warm waters of Cape Verde to gather supplies. There, Captain Every raided 3 English merchant ships for salt beef and fish, offering their destitute crews an arrangement that seemed surprisingly egalitarian. If they joined him, the pirate code ensured that their plunder would be divided fairly, with a relatively equal share for all, and unjust captains could even be voted out. Captain Every's authority was balanced by the power of his quartermaster, Joseph Dawson. 9 of the English sailors chose to join, and soon the pirates set sail into the turquoise waters off the West African coast. Captain Every was well acquainted with this so-called slave coast. After serving in the Royal Navy, he had once earned his living here by purchasing people from African chiefs and even capturing rival slave traders. Men and women had pleaded for mercy as Every chained them in the hold, leaving them to starve and languish in filth. Months later, those who survived were brought out to be sold, condemned to lives of suffering on West Indian plantations. Now, Henry Every returned to this coast, but with a new purpose, raising the English flag in a lush harbor. Captain Every soon drew a group of Guinean villagers who paddled out to trade. Once aboard, the pirates betrayed them, stealing their gold, chaining them, and forcing them into slavery. Continuing south, the crew stripped the Fancy of unnecessary decks, transforming it into one of the fastest ships in the Atlantic. With their newfound speed, Every pursued 2 Danish privateering ships, unleashing a ferocious barrage of cannon fire. The Danes surrendered, handing over 40 pounds of gold, chests filled with fine fabrics, ivory, guns, and 50 large casks of brandy. 17 of their privateers joined the pirate ranks. Months into their journey, the Fancy sailed with cool winds past pods of breaching whales and rounded the Cape of Good Hope. At last, the crew spotted a welcoming harbor on Madagascar shores, home to seafaring colonies of thieves and murderers, true pirate dens. Once ashore, the men reveled, feasting on the stolen brandy. Over the following months, they explored the island's buzzing jungles and traded with Malagasy natives, exchanging guns for cattle. Yet, danger loomed beyond these shores, for the East India Company's heavily armed. Ships prowled these waters, safeguarding England's wealth in tea, textiles, spices, and treasures from Indonesia, China, Persia, and the vast Mughal Empire of India. Exponential profits filled the coffers of English nobles, enabling the East India Company to operate not only as a private trade monopoly, but also as a powerful quasi-nation, wielding mercenary armies and navies to claim foreign lands on behalf of the English crown. Any threats to its trade, whether from rivals or pirates, were met with swift punishment. After raiding a French pirate ship and recruiting 40 of its crew, Captain Every's Fancy was spotted by 3 East India Company vessels. They gave chase, but ultimately reported, "The modified Fancy sails so swiftly now that she fears no pursuer. This ship is destined for the Red Sea, certain to incite chaos in India." Indeed, at the mouth of the Red Sea, A pilgrim fleet returning from Mecca awaited, laden with treasures and concubines from the Islamic world, bound for India. Among the convoy, the most coveted vessel was the Ganges Sawai, or Gunway, owned by the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb himself. Its treasures reflected the opulence of India's ruling elite, adorned in gemstones and gold. Rounding the Horn of Africa, every steered toward the port of Maid in Somalia. When the locals refused to trade with him, the pirates retaliated by setting the town ablaze. Civilians fled in terror as Evry's men destroyed their sacred mosque in an act of revenge. By August 1695, Evry anchored near the volcanic island of Perim, strategically waiting for the Mughal treasure fleet. To his surprise, 5 other pirate crews had also gathered with the same goal. Among them was the legendary Thomas Tew, commanding a ship named Amity. The captains gathered in a raucous pirate council, where they unanimously agreed to appoint Henry Evry as the leader of a united pirate fleet, 6 ships and over 400 men strong. Under the cover of night, the Mughal convoy attempted to slip into open waters unnoticed, but its 2 most heavily laden ships, the Fateh Muhammad and the Ganges Sawai, lagged behind. The pirates set off in pursuit. Thomas Tew raised the black flag against the Fateh Muhammad, but the Mughals retaliated fiercely. A cannonball tore through Tew's abdomen, his entrails spilling into his hands before he collapsed, lifeless. The Fateh Muhammad captured several of his crew and sailed on, until a few nights later, it encountered a dark silhouette on the horizon. The Fancy unleashed a barrage of cannon fire on the Fateh Muhammad. After a brief resistance, the Mughals surrendered. Evry freed the imprisoned crew and claimed the ship's treasures, but the greater prize, the Ganges Sawai, remained ahead. At full sail, the pirates pursued their quarry. On board the Ganges Sawai, the Mughals spotted the smaller Fancy. Despite outnumbering the pirates nearly 5 to 1 and boasting double the cannons, the Mughals could not deter Evry's audacity. He ordered a broadside attack, and the Ganges Sawai absorbed the hit. As the Mughals prepared to return fire, disaster struck. A malfunctioning cannon exploded, killing its gunners and sowing chaos on deck. Sensing an opportunity, Evry commanded another volley. One cannonball struck the Ganges Sawai's mainmast, sending it crashing to the deck in a splintered heap. With their foe crippled, the pirates closed in. They scaled the sides of the ship under the cover of gun smoke, clashing swords with the outnumbered defenders in a frenzied assault. Victory loomed as the Ganges Sawai teetered under the pirate onslaught. After hours of brutal combat, the Ganges Sawai finally capitulated. Captain Evry stood by as his pirates tortured and burned Indian sailors, forcing them to reveal the locations of hidden treasure. The bloody deck was littered with mutilated corpses, and the cries of female pilgrims echoed through the chaos as the pirates repeatedly violated them over several days. Many of the women, desperate to escape such horrors, took their own lives, slitting their throats or drowning themselves. The pirates hauled away a staggering fortune: emeralds, Arabian gold, ivory, and silks, loading the treasures onto the Fancy. It was perhaps the greatest heist in history. Evry claimed an enormous share of the loot, while Quartermaster Dawson distributed the remainder, granting each man a fortune equivalent to a lifetime's earnings. The ravaged Ganges Sawai limped back to port in the days following the attack. Outraged, the Mughals demanded justice and blamed the East India Company for allowing English pirates to infest their waters. To protect its lucrative trade interests, England and the company vowed to capture Evry and absolve themselves of responsibility, but he had vanished into the vast seas. The Fancy made brief stops, purchasing 90 slaves near Madagascar and hunting sea turtles before making the transatlantic journey. 7 months later, they arrived at the secluded Bay of Nassau. Evry posed as a slave trader, bribing the island's governor with chests of gold and even the Fancy itself in exchange for safe harbor. For weeks, the pirates reveled in Nassau's ramshackle taverns, trading their riches for Rome. Their respite was short-lived. Proclamations from the Lords Justices of England soon spread across the seas. We do hereby command all His Majesty's admirals, captains, and officers to seize and take Henry Every and his crew to be punished as pirates upon the high seas. A massive bounty was placed on Henry Every, prompting the Fancy's crew to scatter. Some remained in Nassau, while most sought refuge in the corrupt regions of the 13 colonies. Captain Every, meanwhile, purchased a small ship with a few loyal men and set sail once more. It was said that, in the green fields of Ireland, Every parted ways with his crew. To some, he claimed he was heading to Scotland alone. To others, he said England. His fate became a legend whispered on pirate decks, sung in shanties within raucous taverns, and recorded in the dubious accounts of popular books. Some claimed Every squandered his fortune, others that he eloped with a Mogul princess or ruled a pirate haven on Madagascar. Yet no evidence of his whereabouts ever surfaced. The same year, Every vanished. Joseph Dawson and several crew members who had returned to Britain were captured and paraded to Execution Dock in London to face justice. Before the gallows, one pirate addressed the jeering crowd, admitting their guilt. "We deserve death, for the horrors we inflicted on the poor Indians, and their women still haunt my soul." To onlookers, the pirates' brutal acts of slavery, murder, and abuse revealed the hypocrisy of their supposed free-spirited code. Their maritime atrocities, framed as daring rebellion, appeared instead as tawdry self-interest. The condemned were hanged on short nooses, left to slowly strangle. Their lifeless bodies swung with the tides, decaying into grotesque forms along the gray, windswept coast. Meanwhile, Henry Every and his share of the treasure disappeared into an unseen corner of the world. How did figures like Henry Every and Blackbeard transform from violent fugitives into romanticized adventurers? The documentary Pirates from Magellan TV sheds light on this question. As part of their Britain's Outlaw series, it explores the duality of fascination and horror these swashbuckling tales inspired during their era. I especially enjoyed seeing the weapons, ships, and landscapes of the time brought vividly to life.